So, this morning's conversation is based on an idea that we all know about, but I want to start it with a bit from Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed. In the book Untamed by Glennon Doyle, in the preface she shares a story, and this story is about being with her family at a wildlife park, a zoo, and she talks about this cheetah and being on this cheetah run where they're preparing everyone that's there to see this cheetah run through the park at a high speed, right, like cheetahs do. And in order to have this cheetah perform this run in front of an audience at the will of the zookeeper, they have her trained. So this cheetah grew up with a lab puppy, a dog, and the dog loves chasing this stuffed bunny. And so what they've done is they've attached that bunny to a Jeep, as she tells the story. They've attached the bunny to a Jeep, and the dog that loves this bunny will run and chase the Jeep, and then the cheetah will do what the dog does. And so the cheetah has learned to, when they attach the bunny to the Jeep, the cheetah has learned to chase that bunny, and then at the end it gets fed. It's fed, it has a reward, it gets a steak. And so she was here witnessing this with her family, and I just want to share with you a few words that she said at the end of this experience. She says this, that Tabitha is the name of the cheetah. She says, I watched Tabitha gnawing that steak in the zoo dirt and thought, day after day, this wild animal chases dirty pink bunnies down the well-worn narrow path they cleared for her. Never looking left or right, never catching that damn bunny, settling instead for a store-bought steak and the distracted approval of sweaty strangers, obeying the zookeeper's every command, just like Minnie, the lab she's been trained to believe she is, unaware that if she remembers her wildness just for a moment, she could tear the zookeeper to shreds. She goes on to share a conversation when her daughter asks the zookeeper if Tabitha is happy if she misses the wild. And the zookeeper smiled and said, no, Tabitha was born here. She doesn't know any different. She's never seen the wild. This is a good life for Tabitha. She's much safer here than she would be out in the wild. He goes on to say that her daughter whispered to her, Mommy. She turned wild again as she was observing the cheetah after the activity, when the cheetah was just looking out. And she says she nodded. And she said, I wish I could ask her, what is happening inside you right now? I knew she'd tell me. She'd say, something's off about my life. I feel restless and frustrated. I have this hunch that everything was supposed to be more beautiful than this. So that's an incredible story, and it's a story that reminds me of routine and habit and how programmable we are, how programmed our minds can be, and how when we are in routine, we can be asleep to our wild nature, or as Charles Fillmore might say, our true nature, our divine nature. We can be asleep to what we really are, and we can be so patterned in routine, so patterned in our training, our education, our habits, that we forget what is our true potential. We forget what is really available for us and how we could really be living. And we end up staying safe. We end up feeling protected, but not knowing that this sense of safety is really a net that is holding us back. So there's no better time to ask ourselves than right now, where are we playing it safe? Where in our lives are we showing up caged that we didn't realize before this moment that we were trained, or that we were programmed, or that we were limited in some way? See, this is a divine time. This is a time of divine disruption. And when I say a divine time, I mean a divine time in the sense that it is a time that is deep with potential. Deep with potential on a global level and on a self-development, soul development level. It's a time to reassess our lives. It's a time to reassess our investments. And this now moment for each one of us and for us as a collective is a time to look at collectively, where are we playing it safe? Where are we caged? Are you playing it safe emotionally? Are you playing it safe with your calling or your passion, with your resources or your relationship? Is there a place where you're not living full out? Where you're not turned on to all of life and all of your potential, or what you came here to be and who you came here to activate within yourself, to engage, to give life to? The brain is open when we're out of routine, not only because it becomes aware of what we were unaware of before that, but when routine is broken, we can remember our wildness. When we are inundated with routine and when we are saturated with spending our time, how many of us have felt before this moment that our time is often spent and that we're spent, that our time, rather than us feeling like we're choosing to spend our time, that so much of our time is just absorbed, is just taken. See, there's spending, there's saving, and then there's investing. Right now, a lot of us are in this process of saving time, right? Saving time. And I acknowledge that it's not everyone. There's a lot of people that are kind of over giving in time right now. So wherever we are, there's something to look at about our time and how we spend it, because no matter what our lives look like in this moment, we are out of routine. We are out of the normal routine. And when we're out of the routine, it's like the opposite of what's happening with the cheetah. The cheetah is under the anesthesia of the routine, of the habit, the Labrador chasing the bunny, the Jeep, and then going back into its cage and doing it over, performing something, doing it over, performing something, doing it over. How often do we feel like that's our lives? And like Glennon says in the book, we wake up and we just go sometimes, when we have a moment to breathe, when we have a moment to reflect, when we have a moment where the patterns are broken and we're not just on autopilot, where we have a moment to say, isn't there something more? Isn't there something more to this life, to my life, to our lives? Couldn't we be doing this differently? Shouldn't it feel better? Have you asked yourself that ever in your life? Have you asked yourself about how life is happening? And have you had the feeling that something's off about my life? As she says, I feel restless, frustrated, and I have this hunch that everything was supposed to be more beautiful than this. Any way, any place, any aspect, any area of your life, or how you see the world, right? How you see the world and you see it operating, that you have thought that idea. So many of us have had that feeling that something about the way we're doing all of this is wrong or goes against our nature, that somehow something's not right in the way we're living collectively or individually, that somehow we're living caged. But to break through, it seems like it takes so much effort, right? You've got people living off the grid. You've got people making totally different choices. But there's so much energy that has to go into breaking free when you see systems, when you see patterns, when you are the pattern in expression that you're not even awake to. But right now, right where we are collectively in a consciousness of a broken routine. And there is no better time to invest the time in creating anew, in creating something that really resonates with our hearts, whether it's relationship patterns, emotional patterns, mental patterns, financial patterns, social patterns, systematic patterns, governmental patterns, the way we work, the way we live, the way we love. You know, when people are being treated in recovery programs, there's a reason that a lot of times when conditions or habits are well ingrained, people have to remove themselves from the current environment and be placed in an entirely different environment to make the deep changes that need to happen, to actually truly activate the change. Because what happens, we all know what happens is that we can engage little bits here and there in the change practices, but then when we go to the same place, it's like hearing a song on a tape from your childhood on a record player, and that song makes you remember something, and that remembrance gives you a craving, and that craving leads to an action, and that action leads to a life. That happens all of the time, which is why when people are in a recovery program, it's important sometimes to shift everything about the environment. Because when you shift the environment, you break the cycles, and you break the habits, and you break the patterns. The same thing happens when we go on retreat. If you've ever been on a spiritual retreat or renewal retreat, it's kind of hard to do that in your normal environment, right? If you do it in your normal environment, what happens? Eventually, you start gravitating towards, oh, I could clean this in my house, or I could finish that little bit of work, or I could get to that thing I've always been meaning to get to. I could be on a path of distraction rather than doing what I am intending to do, investing my time in the way I'm intending to invest my time. So a lot of times for retreat, we take ourselves out of the environment. Same thing with sabbatical, with people's work. The sabbatical time is a time to shift your environment, to shift your entire work life environment, and dedicate yourself to something else that you want to birth, to something else of interest, to really invest in something. So we, as a collective, have been delivered into a time of recovery, retreat, sabbatical, to a time of clearing, a time of broken routine, a time where the soil is fertile for change. So what are you doing with it? What are we doing with it? Are we having the same old conversations? Are we at risk for going back to the same patterns that do not serve? Or are we awake, aware, and attentive? Are we paying attention deeply to how we feel within, to what thoughts are coming up, to what parts of life we're no longer willing to return to? What parts of the collective we no longer want to feed or to source? We are so aware on so many levels that we source our lives, that what we feed grows, that what we establish in routine and habit gets a hold of us and creates how we spend our time. So I have a funny little story. I have my little G, and she has never been a routine kiddo. She's never had naps at the same time, and she's never, they're never the same length. You never know what you're going to get. That's just always how it's been, right? And so in this time here at the house mainly, I have had a beloved that is willing to come to the house with me. So both of us have just each other as in this limited circle of who we're seeing, and our household. So we've got 2 households. And so she comes 4 times a week to be with little G, and she comes right before the nap time and then into the nap time. So what do you think has happened? For any of you that know me, and you can imagine why little G does not have a solid routine, doesn't go to sleep at an exact time like a lot of other babes. So what do you think has happened in this time that the beloved is here with her right up until the nap time? Someone takes a nap every day just at about the same time. and she can be strolled into that nap, or she can be walked into that nap. And so when 1:30, 2 o'clock comes around, someone gets sleepy. Now this happens 3 to 4 days a week, 3 to 4 days a week. And I noticed, like, for the first time, wow, I mean, there's a pattern. Now, I had a choice. I could either be the same me for the other 3 to 4 days during the week, right? The same me, and this pattern would dissolve. Do you hear me? If I'm the same me, what's going to happen the rest of the days of the week is I'm going to create another routine. Or I could make some changes in my own mind and my own behavior. And I know when that time rolls around, get out on that walk, pay attention, do this, it's nap time, right? But it takes effort, it takes awareness that it is in me. That it is in me. And that if I am willing, I can ride on this time. I can ride on this time of changed routine and do something that I otherwise didn't seem to have the ability to do, the skills to do, the determination to do, the commitment to do, right? So think about that for a second for your own life. What is it for your own life? That before, you may have tried it, or you may have thought it, or maybe you thought it wasn't you, but right now, you are being invited into a different pattern that serves either the highest good or your highest good, or it's something that you wanted to create, but you just didn't feel like you could. You know, maybe it's a way you wanted to step out of the system, but you didn't think you could. And now you're going, all those things I thought I needed, the way I thought things had to be, I was just the cheetah in the park chasing a bunny. It's just a bunny, and I'm a cheetah. So what is it for you today? I also realized during this time that it's the perfect time for potty training, right? Because we're always around a potty. And so I ask you today, because there is no better time than when you're always around a potty to potty train, right? How are you going to potty train yourself? What do you need to do as far as your own potty training? I want to see some posts about this. I want like a hashtag potty training, my potty training. Because we all have places in our minds, in our lives, in our environments, in our communities, in our spending, in everything. You know, fill in the blank of what it is for you. We all have a place where we somehow grew up and we didn't get potty trained. We somehow grew up and we missed the mark on something that would really benefit us. It would really keep our lives cleaner, safer, etc. Like, it would really make a shift if we were able to potty train ourselves. Now, I can think of ways that our nation and our globe and our world could do that, but I want us to just think for a second. Just picture the earth. I'd like to potty train everyone as far as recycling. That's one of mine. I'm throwing this out for Earth Day. We had Earth Day this last week. One of my hashtag potty trains is that I'd like everyone to understand how to recycle and how not to recycle, and how a lot of stuff that we think can get thrown in the recycling doesn't get recycled. But think about the Mother Earth. Think about the planet. Probably most of us have seen pictures, these before and after pictures. I was struck by one that showed LA, right? So a photo of LA, a before and an after. So when there's a lot of traffic and there's a lot of people, and then an after, when the streets are not so congested and the space is open. And what did I see in those pictures? Clarity. You know, you could see the mountain. You could see it right there, the mountains behind LA. You could just see through and to all of the buildings. So think about those before and after pictures. Any of them that struck you, any of them that you went, whoa, you know, that's a big difference. About your own mind. and recognize that the same is true of your own mind right now. The same is true of your own mind right now. If you could see the before, and it's not really after, it's the before and during picture. The before and during picture of your own mind, what you would see is there's a clearing. What you would see is that the patterns of traffic have shifted. What you would see is that there's a lifting of the fog, there's a lifting of the smog, there is space. Will you go back to? What will be the after picture? What are you no longer willing to do as far as the smog in your life or the traffic on your streets? What will your before and your after image look like? What are you beginning right here and right now that you will sustain after this time? I got a funny text from a live streamer. It said, some of us will come out of this as great cooks and others alcoholics. And then I told that to some people and they said, I think both. But that is the truth. We're creating new habits, aren't we? We're creating new patterns. I was talking to a friend from Italy, and this friend had been talking with relatives and parents and was having a conversation with me about how we're being changed in this moment, how collectively we're being changed in this moment. And so we were just, ideating and ruminating, and I loved the insights that he had. He was saying, we were really learning how to care for each other. Obviously all the other stuff that, is the negative is there, but we're learning how to take care of each other. We're learning how to value each other. We're learning higher practices in terms of wellness. We're learning wellness practices. We're learning how to get out of our own self-interest and into the collective self-interest, and knowing that that self that is the collective is really an important self to consider being your own self. And as we were contemplating this, he said, I wonder if it will last. I wonder if it will stick, or if right after this experience, this now moment that we're having, if we will go straight back to what was before. And I thought for a moment. And then I remembered the people of the Depression and people that have gone through extreme events, families that have come through the Holocaust, that's in their lineage, that's in their family line, people that have lived through the Depression. Have you seen someone that's lived through the Depression in a kitchen? Have you tried to throw away, semi-off food in front of them? Like, what do? They take that food and they make it into soup. They don't just throw it away. They have been changed at a deep level. When something affects us deeply, when we let it in and it becomes part of us, we are changed. The change happens in a deep way. It becomes part of the consciousness that we then live from and that we pass on to future generations. Turn to the familiar, to the old, to the outdated? Or will we as nations and as a world, will we innovate and invest in a future that works for all, in a future that we want? Will we on an individual level look at the jobs we have, look at cultivating new skills, look at cultivating our relationships, look at cultivating new community, new passions? What is your before and after picture? Are you going to go back to the same traffic, the same smog, the same congestion? Are you going to have clean air? Are you going to see the mountains? Take some time to sit with that this week. How we invest our time starts here. It starts now. It starts today. Video that I'm going to share after this service from the author Elizabeth Gilbert, and she tells the story, and it's of her beloved and at the end of her beloved's life. And I'm not going to go into the whole story right now, but she tells this story to really bring home the point who you live is right here in your heart and in your consciousness. She says, this is who you are, your consciousness. And this is where you live, in your heart. And you take that with you everywhere. It was in the before, it's in the now, and it will be in the after. So how we invest our time here and here starts now with each one of us. Namaste and happy Sunday. From my heart to your heart, from my home to your home. I bless you.